Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Common Interest Podcast. As we know, as the saying goes, there's no common enemy, no common friends, no common enemies, just common interests. My name is Thomas Varela, Executive Director of the New Jersey Black Empowerment Coalition. We're a statewide nonprofit at the intersection of policy, democracy, and electoral empowerment. And we're excited to have a great discussion on a proposed policy that has some roots here in New Jersey, but many folks may not still be aware of this term and the potential impact. So we're excited to have Ms. Harbani Ahuja from the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice to talk a little bit about baby bonds. What is it? Why was it proposed? And what is its potential impact? And finally, for those that are interested, how can they get behind advocating for a proposed policy? So, Harbani, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited for a discussion.
Great, great. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work at the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice.
Sure. So my name is Harbani Ahuja, and I'm a public interest attorney. Currently, I work with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice as an associate counsel with the Economic Justice Program. And the Institute really uses cutting edge racial and social justice advocacy to empower people of color and build reparative systems that create wealth, transform justice, and harness democratic power from the ground up in New Jersey. And economic justice is one of our three pillars. And economic justice is really the unfinished business of the civil rights movement. So 50 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about the existence of two Americas, which were sharply divided by race. And the Institute is committed to bridging these two Americas through research and advocacy.
Great, great. And we know you all are leading work around voter registration, safe voter registration, along with reparations. I know the key words say the word reparations, and a lot of key initiatives that are important to Black New Jerseyans. So really appreciate the leadership of Ryan Haygood and the team there at NJISJ. And so one of the things when we think about baby bonds is looking at wealth and how do we think about economic issues that impact folks nationally, but then more importantly here in New Jersey. So could you kind of provide some framework around what does wealth, what are some of the wealth and economic issues that impact Black New Jerseyans more specifically and or New Jerseyans overall? And more specifically, what are some of those implications of that wealth gap?
Yeah, absolutely. So New Jersey actually has some of the worst one of the worst racial wealth gaps in the country. And it's about twice the size of the national racial wealth gap. So the median household wealth for white New Jerseyans is $322,500. And for Black New Jerseyans, it's just $17,700. So that means that our racial wealth gap exceeds an astounding $300,000. I'll repeat that again. The racial wealth gap between white and Black New Jerseyans is $300,000, which is quite astonishing. And like I said, about double the national racial wealth gap. So it's really important that we acknowledge how this wealth gap was created, right? So there's a direct line that can be drawn from the shameful history of our state and our country to today. From the founding of New Jersey, it was called the slave state of the North. And colonial settlers were actually given an additional 150 acres of land for every enslaved person that they brought with them. And through racially restrictive covenants and redlining and predatory lending, New Jersey has really continued this racialized system of wealth acquisition. And the system was created by design, and the effects are still being felt to this day. So, today, Black and other people of color in New Jersey face significant barriers to home ownership. They're burdened by a mountain of student debt. And they also are excluded from quality jobs with wealth building benefits. So, because the system was created by design, we have to address it by design. We need to invest in new systems that connect Black and other people of color to wealth building opportunities. And that's one way in which we hope to do so is through baby bonds.
Yeah, I think that point of the significant wealth gap is key because I think one of the things that hasn't been brought up yet because it hasn't materialized is the fact that for those that are baby boomers, both black and white, baby boomers are going to be in a few years passing down their wealth to their future generation. And that has an opportunity to even widen the gap because, unfortunately, because of histories of redlining and other issues, Black folks have not had an opportunity to build legacy in terms of home ownership. So, thus, they don't have anything to pass down to future generations. Whereas white communities were able to take advantage of the GI Bill and
Mhm.
benefit from redlining in a way that they were able to purchase homes that had more value. So now they're able to pass that down to their offspring, which will then widen the gap. So I think that's something that, there's a lot of attention focused on the wealth gap, but I think there's a good case that it's going to be even worse because of that history in the next few years in terms of the wealth being passed down to the next generation.
Yeah, exactly. And it is policies and laws like this that have been put into place since our country's foundation that have really, worsened the racial wealth gap over time, and prevented Black people and other people of color from really building generational wealth. So, yeah, it cycles from generation to generation. And until we really address it in, a powerful, meaningful way, it's just going to continue.
Great, great. And so you mentioned the term baby bonds. Could you provide a brief explainer of the term, its history, and the theory of the case? I know for some New Jerseyans, baby bonds has some resonance because our current U.S. Senator Cory Booker was one of the first individuals to kind of, I don't want to say coin the term, but to embrace the term and try to make this part of his I think he made it part of his presidential campaign when he was a candidate. So could you kind of bring us up to speed on what this is, baby bonds?
Sure. So the idea of baby bonds as, they're proposed today was originally conceptualized by the economist Derek Hamilton, as a way to address wealth inequality. So baby bonds are a significant monetary investment which is made by the government on behalf of children to be used for future wealth building. So baby bonds promote equity by providing low income and low wealth newborns with a financial endowment for their futures. And that's really a financial head start that's already available to wealthy children. So baby bonds were first introduced at the federal level by Senator Cory Booker, as you said, and Representative Ayanna Pressley in the American Opportunity Accounts Act. And more recently, several state and local jurisdictions have also been introducing their own baby bonds proposals, and New Jersey happens to be one of them.
Interesting, interesting. And so how would it work like structurally? Like how, I know you kind of talked a little bit about, but could you give us a little more details as just the nuts and bolts of how it would work?
Sure. So basically, in a baby bonds program, soon after a child's birth, the government makes an investment into an account or a trust, on that child's behalf. And that trust or account will grow in value over time. So once that child reaches the age of 18, they can use those funds and access them to finance post secondary education, to help make a down payment on a home, to start a small business, or to save for retirement. And so these are essentially ways in which the funds can be used to what are we see as wealth generating assets, and wealth generating.
Interesting, interesting. So what is the potential impact for families when we think about baby bonds more broadly or for Black people more specifically?
Baby bonds proposals are and low wealth children. So, given the significant racial differences in wealth distributions, by providing the large amount of funding to children from households with the least wealth, baby bonds disproportionately benefit Black, Latina, and Indigenous children by time baby group that show that baby bonds could gap.
And you mentioned a little bit about examples of baby bonds being implemented in other states. What lessons do you think exist for New Jersey seeing in terms of its impact? Because I think one of the things that we can kind of conceptualize is that if you're making an investment in children at birth, research studies probably can't begin to measure its impact until 18 years later. And so what are things that can be done now to kind of think about its impact, and or what are lessons that you think New Jersey could learn in terms of other states that may have already implemented or have already explored this issue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, several states have introduced legislation to have a list here: California, Delaware, Iowa, Massachusetts, Nevada, New York, Washington, Wisconsin, and the District of Columbia. So there have been several states and jurisdictions that have introduced baby bonds legislation. And so far, Connecticut and Washington, D.C. have successfully passed baby bonds proposals. And Massachusetts and Washington State have both held statewide task forces on baby bonds, and they've both published reports with recommendations on what a good baby bonds proposal design would look like. So we've been in touch with some of these states to really understand the lessons that were learned from their research on this, to see what might apply to New Jersey. And those are some of the recommendations that we've made. But I will say, obviously every state is different, and different, right? The future cost of education, the future cost of a home, in each state is different. And so we want New Jersey to really engage in its own analysis, and really develop a plan that makes the most sense for New Jersey. Um, and yeah, we're hoping that, with our recommendations, that the state would engage in a similar analysis and use some of the lessons learned from other states to strengthen our program.
So as we know, when we think about issues of policies, there's always a sense that not everyone is on the same page. And when we know from a political perspective, policies that may sound good in theory may not always have the same resonance um, in terms of actually getting passed. And so, not necessarily asking you to kind of go into like a political analysis, but more so from a policy perspective or a policy angle, like what are some of the like reasons that people may say that baby bonds is not a good approach to take or not effective?
Yeah, so I think, one of the main reasons is something that you alluded to before. And I think one of the main issues for electeds across the country when it comes to baby bonds is that they won't see the impact of baby bonds for at least 18 years, right? So once a baby bonds proposal comes to pass, and the first sort of class of it is funded, those children aren't going to see that money for 18 years. And so we're not going to be able to really measure that impact in real time. And so I think it's difficult to get buy-in for a program where, electeds feel like they're not going to be in office to see the positive impacts of it. But baby bonds by nature require a long-term investment. And I think it's necessary for our electeds to make a commitment to creating this sort of innovative, creative program, which would really go a long way in helping to narrow the racial wealth gap. And as I said before, the racial wealth gap was created by design. It was created by laws and policies that deliberately separated Black and other people of color from wealth. And New Jersey really owes it to future generations to be just as deliberate and intentional in connecting our young people of color with wealth as it was about separating them from it.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point and something I've been thinking about lately. I think sometimes we have this feeling of like we had race conscious policies to impact communities, and it seems like folks want to pursue race neutral policies to try to fix the problem. And so, one of the things we think about when you think about change, you almost want to think about an equal and opposite reaction, right? In that whole physics formula. So if you use race to kind of create the problem, you have to account for race as part of the solution. Because at the end of the day, if you don't account for race in the solution, then it may miss something because it was race that caused the problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of, yeah, like our laws and policies, at the beginning, at the foundation of this country and through, the recent past have been things like redlining and racially restrictive covenants. And these specific policies directly harmed Black people, right? And so we need to create policies that uplift them and connect them to wealth.
Definitely, definitely. So we're gonna a couple of questions to close out. It's been very insightful. Ultimately for those that maybe want to support this issue, what can everyday New Jerseyans do to advocate on this issue? Let's say after this talk, they realize that we want to make this investment. We realize that even if we're not going to personally benefit from it, future generations will. And so they're willing to get into the game. What would you suggest that they do?
Yeah, so the concept of baby bonds is not new. Governor Phil Murphy actually championed this issue. He was the first governor to announce the need for a baby bonds program that was state funded back in August 2020.
Okay.
And New Jersey was actually the first state to introduce legislation for a statewide baby bonds program. Unfortunately, other states have sort of beat us to the punch and moved ahead in terms of passage. And so we think it's really time to make baby bonds a reality in New Jersey. So I would encourage folks to take a look at our publication on our website at njisj.org and take action by telling our elected officials to strengthen and pass the pending baby bonds legislation. It's already a bill out there, and we just need to get it. We need to get it done.
Great, great. We appreciate that. And so for folks that want to stay in touch with the Institute, what are the best ways that folks can stay in touch with the Institute? If you feel folks want to be in touch with you, feel free to share your social media as well. But at the very least, with the Institute.
Yeah, absolutely. So folks can stay in touch with the Institute and our work by visiting our website, which is njisj.org, where you can read our reports and connect with us on social media, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can also connect with me about baby bonds by emailing me at hahuja@njisj.org.
Great, great. Well, thank you, Harbani, for your time and the insight on this important topic, giving a chance for everyday citizens to be connected to the policies. That's part of the work that we do at the New Jersey Black Empowerment Coalition is bring policy to the people. Because ultimately, if we are going to exercise our right to vote, we need to understand the potential policies that are available to us and how voting is a way to bring those policies to fruition. And so we're excited to continue to bring this conversation to everyday citizens, to have topics that may be of interest to you. So if you have a topic that you would like for us to explore, if there's a policy issue that you've been curious about and you would want to learn more about it, let us know make a comment, reach out to us directly, and we'll do the work to bring the subject matter expert to you to kind of break down the details of those proposed policies. And so once again, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Common Interest Podcast. My name is Thomas Varela. I serve as the executive director. You can always stay in touch with NJ Beck on social media. We're at NJBEC underscore on Twitter and Instagram. We have a Facebook page, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. So a lot of different ways to stay in touch with us based on your interests. And so we look forward to bringing you this content. Thank you and have a good evening.